So the Prince of Darkness wants to conquer the Earth, but he has to wait until an hour before midnight of New Year's Eve. Is this Eastern time?
It's got nothing to do with New Year's Eve. It has to do with the temporary celestial alignment. The Gregorian monks studied the heavens. They were able to calculate the precise moment of this event. They created our calendar by mapping this event and counting backwards from that moment.
He's coming for you. He's coming for you, Christine.
How do you know my name?
1,000 years has ended! The Dark Angel is loose from his prison!
Get down on the ground!
You said here the guy spoke to you.
Yeah, so what?
The guy doesn't have a tongue.
Your friend and colleague, was he working for someone?
Yes, working for God. You think you've seen everything? You haven't. There are things you never dreamed of. There's another world out there.
Got to talk to her, find out what she knows.
Wait, we don't have a name, all right? That would help. Hello, Christine York.
Take it easy. We are the good guys. What happened?
Those men, they tried to kill me. The men that attacked me are devil worshippers.
No. This says they're the good guys.
The Holy Church has been searching for you since the day you were born.
Chosen for what?
Every 1,000 years on the eve of the millennium, the Dark Angel comes and takes a body, and then he walks the earth looking for a woman who will bear his child.
I've come for my wife.
End of Days exploded onto the big screen in late November 1999 in the USA and made its way to the UK in early December, costing in the region of $100 million, and Universal Pictures would spend a further $60 million marketing the movie. Arnold Schwarzenegger would make a guest appearance on WWF's SmackDown that year to promote the film, and got involved in a punch-up with Triple H, which pleased the audience. It would earn $212 million worldwide, which is good numbers, but considering the cost of investment and advertising, they didn't make a huge amount of money back, considering this was Arnold Schwarzenegger's return to the action genre after being absent for 2 years from the big screen. It would thankfully prove successful on DVD for Universal Pictures to boost their profits, and it would be one of the last films released on the Laserdisc format in the USA, though not enough copies were pressed by Pioneer to meet the pre-orders, so it's become a bit of a collector's item. Directed by Peter Hyams, most famous for the sci-fi films Outland, 2010, and the 90s action films Time Cop and Sudden Death. The reviews for End of Days were mostly negative when the press got to see it. Mark Kermode, writing for Sight and Sound, called it idiotic beyond the point of redemption. This insults audiences and critics, Christians and Satanists alike, reducing 2,000 years of fertile mythology to the level of an incoherent pop video. USA Today called Schwarzenegger's performance among his worst, noting that Arnold seemed to have trouble with his lines and doesn't get to make his trademark wisecracks. In a slightly more positive light, Roger Ebert and Joel Siegel were split on their views on the film, with Joel giving it the thumbs up and Roger the thumbs down. Joel enjoyed the film with its big energy and special effects, but found it goofy and silly. Roger spent the entire time picking holes in the plot, and feeling the rules of which Satan has to follow to bring about the end of the world had no logic. Empire magazine gave it 3 out of 5, saying End of Days is a fun, all-out action movie, with a sexy millennial edge, sell-by date January the 1st. Director Hyams is a workmanlike as ever though, so some of the action moments clunk a tad, and inconsistencies in the plot are generally avoided rather than explained. Plus it's the only movie this century where you get to see Arnold Schwarzenegger getting a severe pummeling from Miriam Margolyes. Schwarzenegger would later say he thought Hyams was the wrong director for the film. He found the finished film too dark, not concerning the themes or story, but Peter Hyams' lighting, saying he did not have the potential, visually and intellectually, to really do something with that movie. The film ended up not being his ride back to the top of the box office. What followed was the sci-fi action film The Sixth Day, that made half of what End of Days did, and Collateral Damage follows suit with similar numbers. Arnold would return as the Terminator in the third film Rise of the Machines in 2003, which would gross nearly $500 million at the box office. But after that, his days as an actor came to a standstill, as he chose a new career in politics to become the governor of California. Armin Bernstein, the founder of Beacon Pictures, had been developing an end of the millennium thriller enlisting writer Andrew Marlowe, who wrote Air Force One and later Hollow Man. The name of the script was titled End of Days, and Armin wanted to get it produced and released by the end of 1999. The idea of the world ending when it hit the year 2000 was an interesting angle, and it would be an easy sell to get the public interested. Andrew Marlowe, when writing the script, had envisioned Arnold in the lead role, and pitched the idea to him, and highlighted that he will be battling Satan. Arnold thought it was a great idea, and then this began a 2-year development on the script between Arnold, Andrew and the producer. The script would be tailored to Arnold's sensibilities, but also throw in new ideas to show that this was something far different to Arnold's previous work. With Arnold committed to the project, the predicted budget of $80 million rose to $100 million. Arnie hadn't been in feature films since 1997, with the critical flop of Batman and Robin. The film was a big blow to Arnold's career, and he also had to have a heart operation, which was successful, but it made him a risk for insurance reasons, with the production of I Am Legend being cancelled by Warner Brothers for that very reason. During the development phase, directors had been suggested and offered the job, with Sam Raimi and Guillermo del Toro, but they both turned it down due to other projects. Come 1998, music video director Marcus Nispel had been hired to direct the film, making End of Days his feature debut. But in August of that year, the Hollywood trades got hold of a 64-page document an assistant had written to cover Marcus's music video shoots. The manifesto had a list of demands from the director, which showed the extent of his ego, and some of his demands were very questionable. Despite a firm denial from Marcus's reps that the manifesto was new, he quickly departed the production, citing artistic differences. With Marcus departing, the producers were in a tight spot, as the film couldn't be delayed, and the producer wouldn't allow the film's release date to be pushed back till early 2000. They needed a reliable director who could work quickly and finish the production on schedule. Plus Arnold would need to sign off on who was chosen. James Cameron came to the rescue and suggested Peter Hyams. Peter was very productive during the 90s, making the likes of Time Cop and The Relic, and Peter was more than happy to take the job. For the cast, we of course have Arnold Schwarzenegger as ex-detective Jericho Kane, who lost faith in religion and is in a deep depression after losing his wife and child. He is no longer a cop and working for a private security company. Gabriel Byrne plays an investment banker who is possessed by the devil and is credited as the Man. Gabriel is a familiar face of cinema, appearing in classics like Excalibur, Miller's Crossing, The Usual Suspects, Point of No Return, and crap like Cool World and Ghost Ship. That same year, he appeared in another religious movie called Stigmata, playing a priest. Robin Tunney plays Christine York. The producers tested a number of actors, with Liv Tyler and Kate Winslet being considered, but after Robin tested and read some lines with Arnold, they got on really well and she enjoyed his humour. Robin had already been acting for a number of years, appearing in The Craft and later Vertical Limit, Supernova and Hollywoodland. Comedian and actor Kevin Pollak plays Bobby Chicago, Jericho's sidekick. Kevin was cast very late in the production, with only 2 to 3 weeks before filming commenced. Kevin was concerned he would disappear next to Arnold, so he had 2 options: either work out, which he didn't want to do, so he grew facial hair. CCH Pounder plays Detective Marge Francis, an old colleague of Jericho. She investigates the case of the priest and soon becomes under the control of Satan. Carol was a familiar face during the 90s, appearing in lukewarm sequels such as Psycho 4 and Robocop 3, and is set to reprise her role in the Avatar sequels. The late Derek O'Connor plays Thomas Aquinas, who is tasked with protecting Christine. Derek appeared in dozens of British TV shows and moved into film with Hawk the Slayer, Time Bandits, Lethal Weapon 2 and Deep Rising. Miriam Margolyes plays Mabel, a disciple of Satan who has taken Christine into her care after the death of her mother. Miriam is a national treasure in the UK and has appeared on the Graham Norton show many times over the years and doesn't hold back on her opinions, making her one of the most popular guests on the show.
No, did you see Mamma Mia? He was very good in Mamma Mia. Did you see that?
That was a dreadful film.
A number of years back, she had complained about Arnold's behaviour, where he deliberately farted in her face while on set. Udo Kier, a familiar face of the action and horror genre, plays the head priest of the Satan worshippers. He arranges the ceremony for Satan to consummate with Christine, but he doesn't hang around for long as Satan gets frustrated with his slow methods. And we have the late Rod Steiger as Father Kovac. Rod had been acting since the 1950s, appearing in popular films in the 90s, such as The Player, The Specialist and Mars Attacks. Rod was excited to take on the part, wanting to portray the father as a normal guy, and not a cliched priest you often saw on film and TV. Filming finally began at the start of November in 1998 and would run through to May the following year. To keep the film on schedule, they shot in LA to double for New York, which would seem quite a challenge as the city didn't have the skyscrapers, so they used CGI to make the skyline of LA match New York. The visual effects team went to New York and shot loads of aerial photography and photos that would be composited and tracked over the LA footage, creating a seamless blend. For 1999 standards, it's very impressive, but you can tell for some shots on the streets that it's clearly a backlot. The first sequence they shot in the film was the opening action scene with Jericho chasing the sniper, as Arnold was seen as a risk due to his heart operation, and being over 50 now, the insurance people and the executives at Universal came to watch him on set, to see if he was still up for the action scenes. After the first week of shooting, the insurance guys saw no issues, and backed off, and not long after that, the film offers started rolling in again for Arnie. Peter Hyams was also a skilled cinematographer and lit most of his movies. For End of Days, he wanted a dramatic colour palette with a series of colours and tones with the use of greys, golds and ambers. The wardrobe for the characters would have shades of grey, black and brown, giving the film a consistent look throughout that matched the cold winter backdrop and fit the tone of this end-of-the-world scenario. Peter gave his production designer a lot of free license to design the sets. One design in particular for the altar set for Satan to consummate with Christine takes inspiration of Chernobyl with this factory-like setting. Arnold was beginning to have issues with Peter's style of lighting, feeling the film was way too dark and complaining he couldn't see a thing when viewing the dailies. In an interview with Ain't It Cool News, and also highlighted in his biography, he said, "I was in the alley and was getting beaten up by all these guys, and I said to Peter, it would be interesting to have some handheld camera work under there and have that kind of point of view. And Peter said, that's crap stuff, I don't believe in that." Arnold replied, "Are you saying that James Cameron does crap stuff? He uses handheld a lot." Peter says, "I don't want to criticise the guy, but he overlights all of his sets, and I don't like the way his things look." Arnold reasoned why he felt defensive was because whenever he saw the playback, he couldn't see anything. It was so dark. Arnold said, "Why don't you light it up? Light it up so we can see things." And Peter replied, "You are used to Cameron's lighting. It's overlit, it's terrible." Originally, Jericho was not supposed to die at the end. In the script, it has Christine tearfully embrace Jericho's body and thanks him for saving her life. Suddenly, God removes the sword from Jericho's body and heals his wounds, bringing him back to life. Christine is surprised and glad Jericho is back, and they embrace before leaving the church together. Halfway through shooting, Peter Hyams suggested to Arnold that he should die in the movie. Of course, Universal Pictures balked at the idea, so Peter shot both endings, and everyone agreed that the new ending was the better one. The film opens in 1979, where a message in the skies signals the arrival of a child that will bring about the end of days. The Pope sends a priest on a mission to protect the newborn baby, but Satanists in New York have found the child, and she is taken into their care. Jumping 20 years later to 1999, Satan erupts out of the ground and possesses an investment banker as he seeks out his wife-to-be. Jericho is working for a private security firm. He and his friend Bobby are assigned to protect the possessed banker. The priest Thomas Aquinas attempts to kill the banker, but Jericho saves him just in time. Jericho catches up to Thomas and takes him down after hearing his ramblings about the end of the world. Thomas is given to the New York police, and the detective tells Jericho that Thomas has no tongue, making him unable to speak, baffling Jericho and Bobby. Jericho and Bobby investigate Thomas's apartment, where they find messages and symbols written in blood on the walls about the end of days. They find out the priest was linked to the Vatican. Jericho goes to speak to Father Kovac, who knew Thomas, to gather more information. But Kovac isn't particularly helpful. Satan enters the hospital where Thomas is recovering and crucifies him on the ceiling. After he is brought down, Jericho and Bobby read in Latin, "Christ in New York," carved into his skin. They begin searching for any similar names and come across Christine York. At Christine's house, the Vatican Knights have discovered her and attempt to kill her. Jericho and Bobby arrive just in the nick of time to rescue her. Jericho does his own research and tells Christine that those guys trying to kill her were the good guys. Christine is confused about the situation but is not honest with Jericho, as she has had many nightmares and visions over the years she can't explain. Satan is getting frustrated with his followers and takes matters into his own hands, and arrives at Christine's house taking out Bobby, who is waiting outside. Jericho and Christine flee and take refuge in a church. Father Kovac tells Jericho and Christine that Satan must impregnate her by midnight on New Year's Eve to usher in the end of days. Christine accepts Kovac's protection. Jericho doesn't take it seriously, feeling his gun can deal with the problem. Satan confronts Jericho in his apartment and tries to tempt him into giving up Christine in exchange for resurrecting his dead family. Jericho resists his temptations and throws Satan out of a window. To Jericho's surprise, Bobby turns up and gives him an excuse that he escaped his car just in time. The two agree to retrieve Christine from the church. The Vatican Knights are one step ahead of Jericho, but he stops the Cardinal and his knights from killing Christine. Satan appears and demands his wife, killing the Vatican Knights in the process. Jericho and Christine escape into an alley, but they are cornered. Christine is taken by Bobby and Satan crucifies Jericho. The visual effects for End of Days would incorporate miniatures, digital mats, CG animation and makeup prosthetics. They pretty much used every tool in the book to get the film done on time. The majority of the CGI was handled by Rhythm and Hughes. One of the big action set pieces was the subway sequence that involved the train exploding. This was mostly done with miniatures. They spent about 10 to 12 weeks to complete it. They built 2 hero trains and a single train for the bit where it crunches up on impact. And they shot the entire sequence at 120 frames per second with motion control cameras. The effects team said it was a difficult sequence to shoot, as they had to make the train come off the track and leap into the air as it explodes. Another large miniature was created for the church, as the devil appears in its true form. They produced a 6-scale miniature of the church to have the roof crumble and the windows explode. They had a mechanism to make all the pews wave in a sequence as the devil gets closer to Jericho. The Satan-like beast had to be the scariest monster on screen, starting out as this transparent ghost-like creature, and then you begin to see more of the beast once Gabriel takes more damage. Stan Winston Studios created several prosthetic makeup pieces for the various stages of Satan's battle injuries. Some were applied to Gabriel Byrne on set, while others were scanned and digitally composited onto the actor's image. Stan Winston's team designed and executed a full-size Satan beast as a suit and mechanical head. The suit would be filmed on set and eventually intercut with computer animation. They originally planned to feature the CG beast for the wide shots only, but they felt confident to punch in for close-ups. But a lot more time was required to work on the textures and lighting to match the other shots. The Stan Winston designed physical puppet would have no screen time and would only be shown with CG animation, which is a huge shame. I think the majority of the visual effects have stood up well over time, especially with turning LA into New York. The miniatures are excellent, with the subway sequence being my favourite part of the film. The beast at the end holds up with the wide shots, but in close-ups you can tell it's very late 90s CGI and hasn't dated particularly well. But you have to give the visual effects team a lot of credit for being daring with the CGI and completing all the effects in a short amount of time to meet its release date. John Debney composed a score to End of Days with additional work by Kevin Key. He got the job thanks to Peter Hyams, who brought on John due to their working relationship on Sudden Death and The Relic. John said he wanted to be really creative and do some really weird sounding things with the music, making use of more cutting edge material, as well as the normal scary action oriented cues. Arnold heard some of the music and he loved what John was doing. John admitted he is never fully satisfied with his work in an interview before the film's release, saying, "I think there are some things that are really great in it, and there are some other things that could have been better. For me personally as a composer, I'm always really self-critical." The film's score came to CD in December 1999, a month after the film's release, with 17 tracks of music, totaling about 40 minutes in length. No complete score is available, but there are a number of bootlegs floating around online, but they seem to have come from the 5.1 surround soundtrack, and someone has taken out the sound effects and dialogue, so the quality is a bit hit and miss. The soundtrack album, featuring many artists, was released in time for the film, featuring Korn, Everlast, Limp Bizkit, Guns N' Roses, Creed, Sonic Youth and Rob Zombie. 2 music videos were produced for MTV, and they would appear on the DVD with Rob Zombie's track Super Beast, which was given a remix, and Everlast's song So Long. I am a fan of John Debney's work. I really like his early scores, in particular Sudden Death, which is one of my favourite action soundtracks, and he did a good job re-recording the Superman the movie score for its 20th anniversary back in 1998. His recent work is still very impressive, especially for the TV show The Orville. I suppose he is best known for his score to The Passion of the Christ. End of Days doesn't quite hit the mark for me. It doesn't have any conventional themes, and relies on unearthly sounds, atmospheric and creepy music, having this industrial vibe to the score in parts to set the tone. It makes use of this choir that harkens back to what Jerry Goldsmith did with The Omen, but this doesn't work quite as well. It soon becomes a bit annoying as they use it a lot when the devil in the form of Gabriel Byrne turns up. There is an alternative main theme that starts out quite interesting, but goes really weird using these samples of voices squeaking and laughing. I can see why they dropped it. The action cues certainly work a treat, especially with the subway battle, and that's what John really excels at. The challenge of combining themes and music to fit the horror and the action/thriller aspect, you end up with an uneven sound, especially when trying to listen to it by itself. You end up with a musical experience that loses its direction as it's trying to fit the genres together. John does strike the satanic nature of the story well with his compositions, and also serves the action, but it gets a bit jumbled up along the way, and when you throw in the heavy metal music, you have too much going on with the sound mix. Not John Debney's best work, but certainly an interesting take on the action horror genre. I grabbed End of Days when it came out on DVD. It was very soon after I picked up my first DVD player, and I was just grabbing titles that had a bunch of special features. I didn't manage to see the film when it came out in cinemas, not sure why I didn't. I'm guessing down to the times it was shown at my local Warner Village. It was an 18 rated movie, so evening shows was the only way to see it, and I probably couldn't be bothered to get the late bus home. Now, I enjoyed End of Days back in the early 2000s. My friends seemed to enjoy it as well, so I found it quite amusing that the reviews from around that time were mostly negative and pretty harsh. It was clear Arnold was starting to fall out of favour with cinema goers who had gotten tired of the action genre, with the likes of The Matrix doing really groundbreaking stuff to give the genre a needed boost. End of Days comes along and doesn't really do much new. Yeah, it has Arnold facing up against a supernatural villain, and the nature of the story fell in line with what was popular at the time, in particular on a visual level with other thrillers from the late 90s with Seven and The Bone Collector. End of Days tries to mix a bunch of genres together and doesn't successfully do it. That doesn't mean it's not entertaining, but you end up with plot holes as the logic behind the end of the world and the devil having a short space of time to take over seems a bit laughable. As the film plays out, you have radio broadcasts declaring people's fears of the millennium and asking the question, is the world coming to an end? The movie doesn't touch upon Y2K, which was a big concern at the time because the news had blown it out of proportion. So once it came to January the 1st, 2000, nothing happened with the computers and some of those religious groups who had made some noise about the end of the world, which happens now and again. Nothing occurred, and ultimately the film's story was deemed instantly dated. The sign of the devil has always been, from my experience and knowledge, to be 666. The Omen famously used it as its main plot. End of Days plays with the idea that it was incorrect and upside down. Not 666, but 999. So being in the UK, this made me laugh. This is the emergency services number. Hello police, I think Gabriel Byrne is after me. So every 1,000 years the devil gets his opportunity to take over the world, but with all things involving time and the exact point of when things can change for the benefit of, say, the devil, the logic is a bit screwed up. Arnold's character jokes about it, saying, "Is this midnight Eastern Standard Time?" Plot holes begin to appear very early on. The priest who attempts to kill the investment banker, how does he know the devil has taken over his body? Also, how can he talk without his tongue? Does he have divine powers? We don't know what Jericho's job is at first, and only discover later, as it's not explained to us from the beginning. He just seems to be protecting the banker, so we have to put the pieces together ourselves from the start. Either footage or lines of dialogue are missing, or the script was a bit incoherent from the start. I think the film has a bit of a stumbling first act. Once Jericho has found Christine, things play out well, and the story seems to be following a straightforward path. It's just the detective work to kickstart the film was a bit messy, letting down the thriller aspect of the story. I do think the critics were harsh on Arnold's performance. I think he does do a good job handling the material, certainly more challenging for him as an actor, as he has to put a lot of emotion into his performance. It's not Oscar-worthy by any stretch of the imagination, but it's good for his standards, but also because his character is very depressed, it doesn't leave much room for his wisecracks and funny one-liners. Thankfully, he does get to say, "Get down, come on, let's go!" a lot. Playing a villain does seem to come naturally to Gabriel Byrne. He hams it up all the way through the film. His first appearance, once the devil has taken his form, he pushes that persona really well, staring people down, puts on the charm but is unpredictable, making him a force to be reckoned with. We've seen a bunch of great actors over time play the human form of the devil. Noteworthy is Sam Neill from The Omen 3, Al Pacino in The Devil's Advocate, and a pretty creepy performance from Peter Stormare in Constantine. Gabriel Byrne seems to be having so much fun with the part, and strolls around the city unseen, causing destruction in his path. His conversation with Jericho in his attempts to persuade him to join him is probably the best scene in the film, as he makes a good case to give up Christine, telling Jericho that God has let him down, and he would make everything right for him again where God had chosen not to. With this being Arnold's return to the big screen, you come to expect the action to be pretty spectacular, but he doesn't really deliver on that front. The helicopter sequence with Jericho chasing the sniper is okay at best. This scene goes on for way too long and mostly consists of Arnold hanging from a cable. The film is littered with some great explosions as the devil enjoys blowing up everything. Maybe he's just a very gassy man. He does seem to piss petrol, which is quite hilarious. Miriam taking on Arnold is super clunky because she is far from being a fighter, so you end up with a scene that is cut so quickly to make this whole punch-up credible. I'm guessing this is the moment where Arnold farted in her face. It's funny seeing Arnold getting thrown around, but it just ends up being very silly for all the wrong reasons. The punch-up in the alley as Jericho fights off Satan's followers to protect Christine is way too dark, and you do struggle to see what's really going on. I agree with Arnold and his concerns at the time in regards to Peter Hyams' lighting, but also it has similar issues to the previous fight with Miriam. It's very choppy as the fight was clearly too slow and the editor has had to give it some more energy. In regards to the photography and with it being too dark, I don't think it's a big issue at all, because there are only a few scenes where you could argue it's a little too dark and dim to make out what's fully going on. It's not to the levels of, say, The Relic, which is really tough to see anything in that film. End of Days doesn't have that problem. For the most part, it does look fantastic. I really like Peter Hyams' style as he gives the film a very cinematic look. It doesn't look cheap. Peter makes use of a lot of wide shots, even for dialogue scenes, to give each room or street level loads of scope, and he has no problem staging the big explosive sequences. When you have a movie that is mostly set at night and you are dealing with the horror genre, you have to light it in a certain way. If it's too bright, it reduces that scare factor. The whole film has this dark, depressive feel to it, like the world is coming to an end. New York doesn't seem like a great place to be. With it being just set after Christmas, it's very cold and grey outside, but inside you have the warm colours. But outside is where the threat is, and with the devil strolling around New York unseen as everyone prepares to bring in the new year, resulting in some great photography and production design to mix the celebration and pending doom to visualise this story. When fans discuss Arnie's last batch of action movies before his move into politics, Erasure seems to be the one that fans highlight as his last decent movie. I've watched Erasure maybe 3 times since it came out and never had the urge to go back to it, and found it pretty forgettable outside of the cool railguns he uses at the end. I've never been too keen on The Sixth Day, and Collateral Damage, which disappointed me at the time, I felt got better on repeated viewing. And Terminator 3, well, I've said all I can say on that movie in my review from a few years ago. So out of this bunch, End of Days weirdly has been my return to movie of his films from that late 90s, early 2000s period. I suppose down to the fact that it was Arnold's last proper R-rated movie, and he had an interesting villain to face up against, instead of another terrorist. The story felt like it was ripped direct from the 1970s, where filmmakers were obsessed with religion and the devil thanks to The Exorcist, and despite its script issues, it at least was doing something different to add to Arnold's filmography. Its story involving the end of the world on New Year's Eve 1999 is horrendously dated and goofy, but it's surprisingly a lot of fun to watch despite a small cast. Everyone puts in a good performance. Robin Tunney's character Christine does sadly end up being a damsel in distress through most of the third act. You could argue End of Days nicely fits into that guilty pleasure category, and I think it helped Arnold move on from his mistakes from a few years earlier with Jingle All the Way and Batman and Robin. His audience want action with adult themes from him. They don't want kids' films, and End of Days made it clear those types of movies were now a thing of the past, and he was back to what he does best, but perhaps it was a little too late. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and click the bell to be notified of my latest retrospectives and reviews. Big thanks to my patrons for supporting the channel. If you want to get involved and gain early access to my content and exclusive videos, then follow the link below.